everyone, we're back, and it's a miserable rainy day. Woke up this morning, it was 39 degrees, pouring rain out. So we're gonna go on an adventure right now. We're heading out to Hayward, Wisconsin, out to the Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame. We're gonna take you guys with us, check out the museum and all the exhibits and artifacts, the history of fishing. We might stop off at a couple little rivers on the way home and see if we can scratch out any fish. Not sure what's in these rivers. We passed by a couple spots along Highway 70 here and they looked really fishy, so we're gonna stop on the way home if it's not raining. Let's see if this is a awesome museum.
Three hours later.
Turn right, then the destination is on your right.
Well, now we just arrived at the Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame Museum in Hayward, Wisconsin, which is basically northwest Wisconsin. Outside the museum complex buildings, we have a bunch of giant fish statues of some walleyes, panfish, trout. Now we're entering the butthole of this giant musky statue. I'll go back and forth between talking to you guys here and letting you guys just kind of walk through the museum with me. So if you have anything you want to read, just pause your screen. I try to get as much information as I could for you guys in this video. So enjoy your tour of the Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame Museum. These are some monster bluegills. That one's got to be 12 and a half, 13 inches at least. Blue northern pike. Oh. I've heard of blue walleyes caught out of Canada. Never heard of a blue pike. Right here we got some old fishing nets and fishing rods. If you look on the bottom right hand side of the screen at that halleck frog, I actually own one of those. I'm not sure how much it's worth. Those were some topwater baits, some classic 1920s to 1940s lures. And there's a lot of artifacts inside this muskie leading up to the mouth of it. Now we're walking up to the mouth of the muskie, passing by a lot of memorial plaques dedicated to a lot of famous fishermen and people who helped with the museum. You get a nice view of Hayward, Wisconsin and the museum complex. That building down below is the main building that you're about to see. Well, now we are right here, up here in this muskie's mouth. Here's one of his teeth right here. This is pretty cool. I guess this Hall of Fame's been here since I think the 1960s, if I'm not mistaken. So this is a really iconic Wisconsin landmark, but it just sucks it's raining so bad right now. But this is really cool. It's a nice view. You got the lake out here. You can barely see it because of the trees, but we're gonna go check out the museum now. Let some other people enjoy this and get on with our day. So now we're about to walk back down the staircase of the muskie. We're walking past some old ice fishing artifacts like old tip-ups. You can kind of see the old designs and some of the inventions and stuff that they used to use ice fishing back in the old days. Here's some old flies and hair jigs and old tackle bots. a world record razorback humpback sucker. Shakespeare Revolution, 1901. Weird looking topwater. But now we're about to look at some little boat exhibits outside here at the Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame Museum. Here's Bill's musky boat. Again, feel free to pause if you see anything you want to read on some of the signs and plaques. There's just so much history in this place. It blows my mind completely. I don't know how they were able to gather together so many boats, motors, fishing reels, fishing lures, just anything and everything that has to do with fishing. I think I'm gonna catch a muskie on a suic this week. I keep seeing suics everywhere, and I was casting one last night. Here we have an old snowmobile made by the Snow Traveler Company. It's got a giant engine on the back of it. Which, one thing you'll notice in this museum, if you're a fan of small engines, you're gonna see a lot of amazing engines going all the way back to the early 1900s, all the way back to the first Evinrude, in fact. Angler's Weather Station. On the spot weather report, when rock is wet, it's raining. When rock is white, it's snowing. When rock is swinging, it's windy. When rock is warm, it's sunny. If you can't see rock, it's foggy. No shit, Sherlock. G-I-E-A, man of fish. No, I'm just kidding. Give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime. That's not something you see every day. A common carp mounted on a wall. Right here we have some old spearing decoys and spears from the 1950s, made for spearing northern pike. You basically get the pike to come look at the decoy and you drive the spear through its back. Not the way I prefer to fish. Here we have Sasquatch, where the primitive fisherman, the primitive man, guess they're calling all fishermen basically a bunch of apes. Some of us are. Here's a nice view of the main museum building. Got some old fishing rods here from the early 1900s. There's a lot of old and very nice taxidermy in this museum, and a lot of very bad taxidermy too, but you can't expect much out of a mount that could be up to 100 years old. Rumor has it there was a jawbone found on the Chippewa River that would have fit the proportions of a 72-inch muskie. Chippewa flowage is where the world record muskie was caught. A lot of people debate that, and I'm even skeptical sometimes looking at the pictures, but world record sits at 69 pounds 11 ounces and I believe 62 inches. But this fish was supposed to be rumored to be 72 inches if they found the rest of the fish washed up on shore. Here we have a 1938 Thompson strip boat made into a bookshelf of musky fishing literature and history. That's because the muskie is very well respected and celebrated here in the state of Wisconsin and the upper Midwest and Canada. Here's the world record largemouth, 22 pounds. Here's the world record tiger muskie. Beautiful fish, 51 pounds, 3 ounces. Inside the main building of the museum complex, you have a lot of pictures of legendary fishing guides, fishing pros, tournament anglers, and you can walk around this entire section of the building and probably be here all day reading about all these fishing legends. There's Sasquatch, Bigfoot again, the primitive fishermen, as they called it. That is a monster walleye. Wow. Hopefully I catch this next time we get back out on the river. 11-pound smallmouth bass, 27 inches long. Unreal. Now here's the world record smallmouth. Again, here's my arm. I know my arm's slightly closer to the camera, but imagine holding that fish by the lip. I mean, 27-inch smallmouth, we can't argue that record. Just to show you guys how big this walleye actually is, here's my arm. And I'm still not even reaching the tip of his tail. This is no longer the world record brown trout because the world record brown trout was 42 pounds caught off of Racine, Wisconsin in Lake Michigan. Not too long ago, honestly, within the past 10-15 years or so. But this is a colossal brown trout, especially for an Arkansas lake or creek. Absolutely ridiculous. I was looking for you in the Hall of Fame, Al. Mr. Al Linder, greatest fisherman ever. Him and his brother Ron Linder, hands down, they were probably the ones who did the most on teaching people how to fish. In Fisherman, Linder's Angling Edge. Awesome. 72-pound lake trout. Here we have some 150-year-old Lake Superior lake trout rigs. Basically old downriggers for trolling, and God knows how they landed some of the giant fish they did on some of this gear back in the old days. That's what always blew my mind about fishing history, is most of the world records are said to be caught like 50 years ago, 100 years ago. It's pretty crazy the type of gear that they were using back in those days. Here we have some custom rods made by the Grant Rod Company. Here's George H.W. Bush being given a Grant rod, custom made. Very nice looking rods. Here we have some fishing rods that are at least 80 to 100 years old, and I'm about to tell you all about one of those rods right now. Alright, so I was just editing the video for the Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame Museum, and it turns out I own a museum piece in my very small antique lure fishing collection. I noticed right here this rod is pretty much the exact same rod is this one right here, except for mine might even be older than that one. But this is like a steel metal fishing rod. I don't know what year it was built. It was made by the GEP Rod Company. GEP. It's got a patent number right on the handle. Not sure you guys can see that or not, but same handle, same cork handle. This even has like a stamp. My cat's gonna come join us right here, but it's got like a little heart with a number in it, a stamp. It's got this logo right here on it. If you guys are antique lure experts, let me know what I have here. I didn't get to read the history on this rod, but I guess I own a freaking museum piece. Right here we have some more old fishing rods, which I kind of wish I was able to read up on a lot more of this stuff here, because there's just so much information to read in this museum. It blows my mind. And I was trying to get good video for you guys and capture the place, but I will definitely be going back again someday so I can read up on this history more. Here we have a bunch of flies, some bass bugs, topwaters and streamers, all sorts of really historical fly patterns that various fly tyers in the St. Paul Fishing Club tied. Here's some old poppers, really nice work. Here's a big history on spinning reels, one of the main reels we all learned to use in freshwater fishing and saltwater fishing. Like I said, I wish I was able to really look at and read all of this, but we only had about 2 or 3 hours we could spend in this museum. Feel free to pause that and just read up on all this information whenever you see a plaque, like I said. Right here we have some really historical fly fishing artifacts. Some of this stuff is going back to the 1800s. I believe they even had a fly rod from the 1700s, if I'm not mistaken, but don't quote me on that or hold me to that. But it's amazing what they've had donated to them, and every single artifact they were able to preserve, and the fact that it's not broken, or they have all the original boxes, the original parts, just amazing. Here we have some bunny strip zonker flies, some original designs there in that fly pattern. I'm not a fly fishing expert, but I do a little bit of fly fishing here and there, and I definitely want to get more into it. And I'm very into fly tying and jig tying. Just every little tiny thing you see here, feel free to pause and zoom into it and look at it more. I mean, I tried to film this video so that you guys could have a very immersive experience looking at all this, but I couldn't get every little tag or any of that, so if you're able to read it zooming in, feel free to do so. Right here we have some really crazy fishing reels and spooling devices, bunch of different vintage and antique fly reels. I absolutely love that they have the original boxes and fly tying stations and vices, all that stuff in this museum. To my buddy Tim, this room is for you right here. This is the fly fishing room here at the Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame. Just giving my friend Tim a shout out. Now we have a display case of push button spin cast reels, which are the type of fishing reels most of us started out on as kids, like the old Zepco 204 or 303 or whatever the hell you call it. The one that was made out of plastic and always tangled up a lot and got your dad frustrated on the boat trying to detangle it. I actually still own my dad's old Zepco 1 push button spin cast reel from back in the 60s or 70s, which they had one of them in this museum, surprisingly. Or not surprisingly, as you can see they have everything. Now we're kind of moving in to the old history of fishing reels. Reels going all the way back to the Civil War. A lot of musky baits, a lot of topwater. Just an awesome collection. I know I keep saying it, but I'm just absolutely mind blown by a lot of the fishing stuff I've never even seen before. And I've been studying fishing my entire life practically. But if you're a musky fisherman, a fly fisherman, you'll love this museum. Here we have the classic Rapala original. Rapala, however you like to say it. A lot of classic crankbaits and jerkbaits. Some of these lures date back to the early 1900s. And some of them are only as far back as the 1990s, but they have a little bit of everything when it comes to every fishing technique, type of lure. They even have designs I'm sure none of us have ever seen before. Here's the Mud Puppies Musky Bait Company from Mosinee, Wisconsin, which is a company I believe still makes lures today, if I'm not mistaken. Here's the old Mud Puppy boxes, which I find it absolutely awesome when you have the original box from way back when. So this display case shows pretty much a lot of finesse fishing techniques we still use today, like bucktail jigs, soft plastic lizards and crayfish, tinsel jigs, all that good stuff. If you're a walleye, smallmouth fisherman, a pan fisherman, you probably use hair jigs from time to time. Right here we have the history and building process of the Rapala, or in some places the Rapala fishing lure. The Rapala fishing lure was first produced in 1938 by the inventor Louie Rapala in the country of Finland. To this very day, we're still using Rapala lures of all different types. Normally, they are ahead of every other bait company on the market when it comes to inventing new fishing lures, new lure designs. They basically changed the game forever for fresh and saltwater fishing, and more world record fish have supposedly been caught on Rapala lures than any other lure in history. This is basically the history of the jerkbait itself, and one of my top 3 favorite lures of all time. There's something you don't see every day. A 1940s Rapala original with the original tinfoil finishes. This is a repainted one. This is unbelievable. I'm just blown away by this collection of lures. the entire collection in general is just amazing here. If you're a fisherman, you owe it to yourself to come and check this out. Well, in this part of the video, folks, I'm gonna let you guys sit back and relax and take a really extensive tour of this gigantic fishing lure collection here at the Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame Museum. But I'm gonna let you guys just enjoy the music and tour this part of the video on your own. Right here we have a selection of old bait casting reels, some of them dating back to the early 1900s all the way up until the 1980s. Some of these reels were known as knuckle buster bait casters because back in the old days they would hurt your knuckles and hands casting them and gripping them all day long with no tension knob on the spool to adjust, and not a very smooth retrieve either when you're retrieving your lure. Your grandfathers and grandmothers who fished will tell you all about knuckle busters. Here's some nice musky baits in this collection. Pretty soon I'm going to take you into the musky room and tell you guys all about the history of the world record muskies, the fishing legends, Cal Johnson and Louie Spray. Here's a really nice lure display box full of old fishing lures. One thing you'll see at a museum, it's a lot of old antique stuff, and if you're into fishing and antique lure collecting, I'm sure this museum will have you absolutely fascinated for hours and days, because we're definitely gonna go back and visit this museum again someday and actually get to absorb it and read all the information. Here's some old live bait buckets, a lot of different inventions, even one made out of glass, oddly, that probably wouldn't work too well. Surprised it even lasted since 1905. Glass is pretty durable, but not that durable. Here we have some more knuckle busters. Probably a lot of old Shakespeare reels and fluters. Right here, some pre and post Civil War era fishing reels. 1835 to 1839, 1850 knuckle buster bait caster, 1840 to 1850, absolutely amazing. People were very, very intelligent and inventive back in those days. For them to even figure out how to make some of these reels was pretty impressive. Got some old Mitchell reels there and Zepcos. Right here we've got the 4-pound 12-ounce world record bluegill, 15 inches long, and a two-headed Siamese twin walleye, No, that's not real, folks. We don't have two-headed fish in Wisconsin. No matter how polluted the lakes sometimes might be, we're not growing two-headed fish here in Wisconsin. Here we have spoons made by the Ottsboro Spoon Company. These are sports team themed spoons. Right over here, we got a Green Bay Packers spoon for all you cheeseheads out there. Now we're gonna enter the memorial room to the musky fishing legend Louie Spray, who shattered his own world record muskie record many times in his life. And there's a lot of rumor and speculation that some of his records weren't legit records, but there's one thing for certain: Louie Spray caught a lot of monster muskies and knew what he was doing. And he caught those muskies back in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s on fishing gear that is considered primitive today by today's standards. But I'm gonna shut up now and let you guys just tour this room and enjoy all the musky fishing history and artifacts. Well, this room right here is dedicated to the legendary Louie Spray, the guy who holds the world record for the muskie. Right here is that world record muskie, 69 pounds, 11 ounces, and it was caught out of the Chippewa flowage, October 20th, 1949. There's been a lot of speculation that this muskie wasn't a real world record. If this muskie was the size of the one in this display case, which this is a replica, I believe. Yeah, it has to be. It wouldn't look that good. But if the fish was the size of this one, it was definitely a world record. Right here is Louie Spray's actual clothing, his fishing shoes. A lot of the gear that's in this room is actual fishing rods and reels, line, all sorts of stuff that Louie Spray used. Over here is his motor. I mean, this is an incredible collection and a good tribute to the guy who made Wisconsin musky fishing famous and put it on the map. Another record fish is the Cal Johnson fish that gets talked about a lot. Here's Louie Spray right here. Broke his own record again. Louie Spray back here broke his own record again. But this is the Cal Johnson fish. A lot of people believe that one's bigger than Louie Spray's, perhaps. They don't look far off, but there's been a lot of speculation and rumors that that photograph made the fish look bigger, yada yada yada. But if this fish right here is the fish, I can't say any of us have ever seen a muskie this big. And it's gonna be a hard one to beat. Maybe it'll come out of Green Bay, Lake St. Clair, some Canadian lake like Eagle Lake. Maybe it'll come out of one of these Northwoods lakes, but I don't think we're gonna be seeing 70-pound muskies anytime soon. Right here we have the old Suick Muskie Thriller muskie bait, just known as the Suick. Invented in Pelican Lake, Wisconsin, Antigo, Wisconsin area. Right here we have a display of different crawler baits and bucktails, jerk baits. Some old topwater baits for muskies. These are boxes made for the rich and powerful. Made for people named Jeffrey. Come here, Jeffrey. Come use your gold-plated tackle box. This is an awesome muskie box made out of wood. This is Jeffrey's tackle box. Oh, Jeffrey, with your gold-plated tackle box. Come over here and catch a muskie. Here's some unique fishing lures for you. Got a pair of dentures with some streamer flies as hooks. A beer bottle, some pens, spoons. A couple ladies of the night. Gigantic worm, bottle full of, well, nothing, I guess. If you grew up fishing in Wisconsin or Minnesota, Canada, you've probably used a Mep spinner for muskies and pike. Probably even smallmouth, trout, salmon. Here's a big display to ice fishing. A lot of old tip-ups and power augers. Ice fishing hasn't changed much over the course of the past 100 years, but a lot of this stuff is still used today. Tip-ups don't go out of style for pike and walleyes, that's for sure. Or even trout. Some places salmon. Well, this goes down as the most interesting fishing lure I've ever seen. It's like a chipmunk mounted to a hook system. A gopher lure. I guess it's a gopher. very interesting baits right here. Here's a tribute to some top water baits and old school lures right here. We got ourselves some frogs, ribbit. We got ourselves a ducky, quack quack. The fishing rods shown only partially reflect the development of fishing rods. From the earliest heavy tree limb to the willow branch to the cane pole, rods were then developed from solid wood, split bamboo, solid steel in all shapes, hollow steel, fiberglass, then graphite, boron, and on and on. Pictures shown of ancient Egyptians, Roman gods, and Romans were all taken from carvings in ancient temples. These predated the nets that produced the loaves and fishes of the Bible by thousands of years. Right here we have a display case of original lure boxes from companies like Bomber, Head-In, the Creechub Pikey Minnow Company, Sure Strike, Paul Bunyan Lures, just all sorts of original boxes, which is amazing these things even held up over the years because they're made out of cardboard, pretty much paper and cardboard. But if you have an original antique lure in its original box, it ups the value of that lure tremendously. Well, now we know where the original spoon lure came from. Which I already knew. That's a whole story about the fisherman dropping his lunch spoon in the lake and a pike coming by and grabbing it. Here's a spoon made out of a shell, like a seashell. Here's an early perch pattern.
A rare and elusive first fishing pole, a stick.
Oh yeah, the original cane pole. I used to fish like that when I was a kid. Just grab a stick, some line, hook and a little bobber and some worms. That's how we all started to fish, some of us. Some of our parents were like, hell no, we're not buying you a fishing rod so you can lose it in the lake when you're 5 years old. 4 years old. There's probably people right now listening to this. Yeah, right, I bought my kid a musky rod when he was 3. Well, and I'm sure little Johnny lost it in the lake too. Right here we have various fishing club patches in these display cases. Some of them from the Fox Valley and Fishermen Fraternity. Some of them from bass fishing clubs, walleye fishing clubs, musky fishing clubs. I mean, just about every type of fishing club you can imagine. Right here we have a tackle box that someone donated. Old antique boxes, in fact. It's really cool that some of our grandfathers and grandmothers could have a fortune in antique fishing lures and tackle, and most of us wouldn't even know it unless we get those tackle boxes handed down to us. Here is a small history of bait buckets, minnow buckets. That one's one of the first that you could put in the water and actually keep your minnows alive. Very cool. So I believe this is supposed to be lure maker and creator Louie Spray workbench, and it's woodwork shop. My favorite lure of all time is the Rapala Original when it comes to hard baits. I got some original Rapalas right there. You guys see me use that lure a lot here on Weckerle Outdoors. A lot of people don't use it anymore as much. It still sells a lot, but you don't really see a lot of people using them. Here's his workbench. If anyone's been fishing long enough, you all have used a Rapala, most likely. Whether it's an original Husky jerk, an X wrap, a shad wrap, rattling wrap, DT, crankbait. This is really cool. Very good tribute to the man himself who invented the jerk bait. Here we have a display case of children's fishing photos. I'm also going to show you a huge haul of fishing photographs of people that send their photos into the Hall of Fame Museum, and if they're lucky enough, they have their photos displayed in their display cases. So if any of you are in these photos or any of your children, feel free to leave a comment down below and let us know if it's any of you in these fishing photos, because I'd be very interested to hear your fishing stories, especially of that giant northern pike right there that kid caught, or any of these fishing photos for that matter. There's a giant paddlefish. I'd like to know the story behind that. But leave a comment down below. Here we have a bunch of fillet knives, fish scalers, and fish stringers used to keep your catch and fillet your fish for dinner. Now this is a display case of different types of floats and bobbers used throughout history. Some of them made in Europe, some of them made in the United States. But different types of bobbers help you fish live bait a lot more effectively. This is a really unique musky mount, going back to the days when people used to keep muskies and show them off at the bait shop. They have fake ice in there. It's like an ice chest. This fish is 54 inches, weighed 44 pounds. Very, very unique way to display a muskie. Also a really good way to piss a lot of musky fishermen off. Now we're getting into the part of the museum where they display all their boat motors and the history behind them. Whether it's outboard motors, trolling motors, old wooden boats. There's a lot of good taxidermy in these rooms, and if you're a small engine guy, you're not going to want to miss this part. Hayward motors were invented in Okauchee Lake, Wisconsin, on Okauchee Lake, and this is a 1917 2-horsepower Hayward. This motor's over 100 years old. Absolutely amazing. Thanks to Mr. Hayward, we have outboard motors. Right here we have a bunch of different species of salmon and trout mounted on the walls. Everything from king salmon, coho salmon, lake trout, brook trout, rainbow trout. Every single species of trout and salmon, grayling, char. Now here's more outboard boat motors dating back to the 1920s, 1930s. absolutely amazing what they were able to do all the way back then with engines. They were the ones who invented and gave birth to all the engines and things we use today, so we got to give it up to these geniuses of ingenuity, these inventors. We got a Martin 20 horse motor, 1948. Just feel free to pause on any of this information if you can read it, because there's a lot of good information here. If you're into small engines, fishing, or if you just want to learn something new. Well, this motor definitely seen better days, but it's an old Johnson motor, probably found in some garage in an abandoned, fallen down barn. Water probably got to it over the years and the elements, or it was probably found on the bottom of a lake for all we know. Pretty cool. Right here we have some Amazon River fish like peacock bass, piranhas. Then now we have some pickerel, some pike from European countries, which grow absolutely massive over in Europe. That one pike right there has to measure at least 45 inches long. Right here we got a 1955 Evinrude Big Twin, a Johnson 25 horse. I'm just infatuated with these small, old outboard motors. So right here we have some taxidermy done by artist Mike Kunast back in 1980 of a couple brook trout living under a creek embankment. It shows how they like to hide right underneath the roots and branches of fallen trees and shorelines. So keep that in mind if you're ever brook trout fishing. Now we got some taxidermy of all the different species of panfish, bluegills, crappies, perch, rock bass, white bass, all sorts of different panfish species that we like to catch here in freshwater. We got some tilapias, which live more down south, not here in Wisconsin. But then we're back to the old boat motors. Here we have some wooden boats and a log cabin built inside the museum. There's just all sorts of cool displays here at the museum here in Hayward. There's my wife waving at us, taking a break. This is the inside of a log cabin that they have at the museum. And this one looks like a bear broke into it and was trying to get himself a meal. Right here we got all the different species of bass, which I said white bass were panfish before, but they're actually in the bass family. Largemouth and smallmouth bass are actually in the panfish family. Here we have a German brown trout, 29 pounds. Very nice fish, but a very old mount. Here's a walleye eating a leech on a slip sinker rig, or a Lindy rig. Very nice mount, very unique. This is the history of fish locators and, well, flasher locators that people used to use open water on their boats a lot more, but now more ice fishermen use these flashers. We've got some old school paper graph locators. It's basically the history of fish locators overall. I think everything except for forward facing sonar live scope is in this display case. Right here it says that Ole Evinrude back in 1907 invented the outboard motor on Lake Ripley, but there's a sign over in Okauchee Lake, Wisconsin on their bridge on Okauchee Lake that says Evinrude invented the Evinrude boat motor on Lake Okauchee, not Lake Ripley. But this is the first model of the Evinrude outboard motor, and this is a hand-propelled motor, which is pretty unique and very innovative. Here's a bunch of electric trolling motors dating all the way back to the 1940s, which I didn't even know before visiting this museum that trolling motors even existed back in the 1940s. Even in the 1930s it looks like. So trolling motors go way back. Now we're just looking at a display case of musky lures again. Since we are here in the Wisconsin, Midwest, Minnesota region, musky fishing and pike fishing is very popular, so there's a lot of musky fishing history in this museum. Now we're looking at the history of the Zepco, Quantum Zepco Corporation. History of their fishing reels, whether it's the spin cast reels, spinning reels. I actually own a Zepco 1 spin cast reel, which is to the right of the sign in that display case. Here's a history on spinning reels again. You can see all the different ways they built these spinning reels, how they adapted. There's the Zepco 1 on the right hand side of that sign, like I was saying. I own my father's that he had since he was a kid, and now it's just a decorative piece in our living room at home. Here's a room full of motors again. Like I said, if you're a small engine outboard motor enthusiast or fanatic, visit the Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame. You owe it to yourself. And now we're entering the Hall of Fishing Photographs. Each section of this display is dedicated to a different species of fish, whether you're talking panfish, striped bass, largemouth, smallmouth bass, pike, muskies, walleyes. They even have pictures of carp, catfish, garfish, every single species of freshwater fish. You just have to find the section or the species that you like most, find that section, and you'll get to view everyone's photographs pretty much. And like I said earlier in this video, if you see yourself in any of these photos, if you ever sent your photos in to this museum, let us know with a comment down below. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. It helps the page grow. That fish right there is actually as big as the 18-pound state record Wisconsin walleye, caught out of High Lake near Boulder Junction, Wisconsin, Land O'Lakes, Wisconsin. This one wasn't caught in Wisconsin, but it's an 18-pounder, so I believe this fish was a 36-inch fish also. I've seen this in magazines and stuff before, but that's absolutely unreal. Here we have some old temperature gauges and paper graphs. You literally had to load paper into these things like a printer. Very old school fish locator technology. Here's a model of the complex here. And this is kind of like a log cabin room. Here we have a display that's made to look like an old bait shop from back in the old days. You can see the old cash register, the vintage antique fishing gear. They've really put a lot of effort and time into all the displays here at the Hall of Fame Museum. So this is the tribute to saltwater fishing they have here at the Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame Museum. They couldn't leave saltwater fishermen out, so this one's for you, saltwater anglers. We got a couple big tarpon up here. Got a sawfish. Wahoo, big swordfish, some barracuda, all sorts of stuff. Hammerhead shark. And down here we have a couple wooden boats. 1940s 2.75 horsepower motor. This boat's from 1900. They were very crafty back in the old days. These boats are still holding up when a lot of stuff today would have already broke or sank when it comes to boats. This boat right here was from 1920s to 1940s. This one right here was built in the 40s to 1950s. Excellent craftsmanship. Very cool. Now we're looking at a display of hummingbird history, the hummingbird fish locator, the flasher, one of the first that was ever marketed. Here's some fluter reels and some history. I use a lot of fluter reels myself, like the Tryon reels, really affordable and very high quality reel for its price. I've already done a review on that fishing reel before. Now we're looking at the coelacanth fish, a prehistoric fish that was found back in 1936. And now they're a little bit more common to find, but for millions of years, they were said to be extinct. And well, they started catching them, and now they're a little bit more common, like I said. Kind of a Loch Ness monster. What's really funny and crazy is you actually open that lure up and you put a minnow inside of it and close it up. The minnow just swims around inside of that. I guess that was the first match the hatch lure pattern ever. I actually own one of these right here in my antique lure collection. I just asked my wife if she thinks it's worth anything because it's in the Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame. Here's some more old lures. World War II survival kit for fishing. I think I just saw another YouTuber recently use one of these. I think it was Mav. The page is called Mav or something. I might be wrong, but he used a World War II survival kit. You guys can check his video out and see how that turned out for him. Here's some old musky baits again. Bobby baits. Very famous jerk bait, just like the suic. Classic musky baits right there, the bobby bait and suic. Over here we just have some advertisements for different boat motors and lures. But right here we have the history of Mustad fishing hooks, which is really interesting. I use a lot of Mustad fishing hooks myself. A lot of pro fishermen do as well. They're really good hooks, really sharp, strong. Now we got some Kaiser musky lures, an old school jerk bait, topwater bait company from back in the old days. These were manufactured and donated by Bill Kaiser. We got some Skinner spoon lures, old school bucktail spinners basically for muskies and pike. The spinner has been around since the 1800s and it's been catching fish ever since. This is a display case donated by Carl Colleen, and these are a lot of classic head-in and fluger lures and baits like the globe and all sorts of different baits. I'm not an antique lure expert, but a lot of these lures in this display case are still used today and still sold today. But a lot of them have fallen out of fashion, which I'm sure if they put them back into production, they'd still be catching fish today. Sometimes it's using something different that gets the fish's attention. And a lot of these old baits haven't been seen by any fish. There's some old school hula poppers. This is a Fred Arbogast display, which I use the jitterbug for nighttime bass. A lot of us use Fred Arbogast lures. That bait right there, the black jitterbug, is still one of the best baits for nighttime bass fishing. Tie that thing on, reel it around slowly. Bloop, 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 bloop. Bam. You'll score some nighttime bass. This lure right here gave birth to structure fishing, like fishing drop-offs and finding structure, trolling crankbaits. A lot of fish were caught on this lure, the spoon plug. There's a book called Spoon Plugin that I read a long time ago when I was a kid. But Buck Perry taught us a lot about finding fish on structures, drop-offs, underwater points, shallow flats, all that stuff. This bait caught a lot of walleyes, pike, bass back in the old days. It still does, I'm sure. None of this stuff stops working. A lot of it we still use today. Spinners and suets and all the same top waters and jerk baits. This is a really cool collection of stuff in this museum. Just taking you guys along for the ride, and hopefully you're enjoying the video. There's just so much to look at here. I'm trying to show you guys as much as possible. Sorry about the flashing light, folks. The light was burning out here at the museum, but this is the evolution of fishing line. And they basically made fishing line out of horsehair, twisted cotton, monofilament, braided cotton, all sorts of different materials. You got braided silk right there. I'm sorry if your eyes are sensitive to flashing lights, but I wanted to show you guys the evolution of fishing line, because fishing line is one of the most important things in the sport of fishing. It's our connection to the fish, basically. That was a really cool fishing line display, and now we're back at the boat motors. And this is basically every single outboard boat motor you could ever imagine in one museum. It's just so awesome that they were able to accumulate all this stuff into one place and share it with the public and anyone interested in seeing it. Here we have a 1921 Evinrude 2-horsepower motor. And here's an Alto lightweight folding motor from 1929 in the original box. It's one thing when you find the actual object, but when you find the box or package it came in, it's absolutely crazy. Here we have some old wooden boats. And we even have a boat that you can propeller with your feet, kind of like the new kayaks with the propeller driven mechanisms on it. The size of some of these motors back in the old days is absolutely ridiculous. Just to get 15 horsepower out of a motor, you'd have to have this big honking car engine on the back of your boat, basically. But if you're into freshwater fishing or fishing at all, or small engines, make sure you come and check this place out, like I've been saying. There's another giant tarpon. That's a saltwater fish. Hey, some muskies. Look at that big honking engine right there. Thing looks like it should be in a boiler room, not on a boat. Here's some more hot rod looking Mercury motors. Those motors were from the 1950s. As you turn around the room, you kind of go from the 1950s into the 60s. But they got Mercury motors, Yamahas, Evinrudes, all sorts of different boat motors in this place, as you can see. There's an old 20-horse Mercury motor. Personally, I'm into Yamaha motors, but Mercury's not bad. Now we have ourselves some old Abu Garcia Ambassador reels and different types of bait casting reels. That one right there is from back in the 1980s. Right here we've got some old wooden boats, and this gigantic honking motor is a 2.75 horsepower Cayley Jr. Speed Twin built in 1929. This boat up on top is some sort of self-propelled motor, but these wooden boats are absolute works of art. We got some motors from the late 1950s and another wooden boat. I'd love to own a wooden boat someday. Beautiful craftsmanship. Here's some old musky lures, bass fishing lures. It's unbelievable what this Hall of Fame has in their collection. Stuff going back over 100 years. Even boat motors that are 100 years old. Some old bucktails. Still a tried and true method of catching muskies, pike. Everyone who fishes muskies fishes with a bucktail. Here's a little information. Sorry for the glare on the camera. Back to the boat motors. The collection is just so big, it's unreal. They have Johnsons and Evinrudes and Mercury motors, Sea Cane motors, every single type of motor. Here's a 1966 Evinrude. My grandfather actually has one in his basement that's a 15 horsepower. Looks a lot similar to this. This big tank of a motor, 50 horsepower, 1943 Evinrude Storm. Wow. Thing's a beast. Look at this, wind-propelled wooden prop. Oh my God, this is weird. Super cool. Then this one, you pedal. Goes down to the prop. 1949. So this is pretty much the first kayak slash 14-foot fishing boat. That's pretty damn cool, actually. Why don't they make these anymore? Now we're looking at a blue silver pike, a rare blue pike from Thaddeus Lake up in Canada. It was 8 pounds and 32 inches long. I've heard of blue walleyes, but never heard of blue pike before. Alright, well that's gonna conclude this video. I hope you guys stick around for the next parts of this video because our vacation's not over yet. We're gonna do some fishing on the way home, which if we catch anything, you guys will know in the next video. We didn't want to drag this on too long because this was a really lengthy video. We basically got just about everything you would ever want to see in this whole entire museum dedicated to fishing. I'm really blown away at the collection they have here. You could not come back here 5 times and read everything you could learn. I could sit here for days just reading about every motor, every lure company, every rod and reel. It blew me away. My wife loved it. This giant musky right here is pretty damn sweet. Hopefully I get one half as big as that this week. We've had some really interesting weather, which I'm not sure how it's going to affect the fishing the next few days. I mean, when you go from 90 degrees last week and it dropped down to 38 degrees last night, it's supposed to get to 38 tonight again. That's a big change in weather. The smallmouth bass haven't seemed to mind up here this trip. I don't know if today turned them off or not. We haven't gotten out fishing yet. But in the next part, we're gonna see if we can catch a few fish on the way home. And tomorrow we're gonna get back out for some smallmouth bass. We're gonna get back out for muskies. So stay tuned. There's gonna be more videos coming from this trip. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you enjoyed the tour here in Hayward, Wisconsin at the Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame. Good luck fishing.